appreciate everybody being here. Thank you for your patience. I wanted to just have this small talk with Beau Fleuve using arts. Is that, as we all know, with our times that we have here in America, here in the city of Buffalo, and our cultures, is that really have people really sit down and have these discussions. Everybody from a different walk of life, but people who are community stakeholders, who are fabrics of our community, who are the power players in our community. We just sit down and have this dialogue and kind of get their perspective. If we kind of like look around the room, it's kind of to have a different perspective from every angle, from a black male, black female, white female, mixed, white male, and kind of have those different perspectives of where we are. So as we kind of just jump into it, feel free to be no holds barred. As I say, that's the reason you came. That's the reason you came. So, being that's the reason you So here's how we'll kind of start this off. Is since the reason why you came, how we'll kind of do it is who you are and kind of like your perspective right now on how things are in society, kind of almost like your makeup.
Growing up in the east side of Buffalo, Boxing, Moselle, East Ferry area, I've seen the craziest of things. Honestly, when people talk about growing up, when you got friends, a majority of my male friends are literally either dead or in jail. And it came a point where you really got numb to the killings. And now, to this day, I still am. And trying to figure out like why am I so numb? Because no one should be numb to those things. No one should be used to it. Like hearing gunshots, I'll be sitting at my desk doing work, hear the gunshots, turn the music right up, right? Because it becomes something you become accustomed to, and no one should become accustomed to that. And I didn't realize that until I was about 32 years old, just last year. I was a part of a Leadership Buffalo program, and shout out to Leadership Buffalo. Because during that time, I realized that the things that were the norm for me and that were just regular hood stuff that I lived with and cope with was very outrageous to other people, very hard to deal with. And I'm just sitting here like, why is you so shocked, right? So growing up, I always went to diverse schools, always was a great group of different people in the classroom that I learned from. One of my best friends was white. When I was in grammar school, I got to high school, went to McKinley. At the time, we had the best hockey team around, so it was a lot of different diversity at the school. And then I went on to go to University of Buffalo, predominantly, of course, a PWI. And so being there, I was a part of different organizations where I had to vacillate between people who were like BSU or NAACP, and being a part of a business fraternity where I was calling people my brothers who didn't look like me, who were Asian and Caucasian. And I noticed one day when I'm with my friends who were black, I spoke a different language, I talked a different way, I dressed a certain way. And then when I got around the business fraternity that I was trying to be a part of, I spoke a different way, I talked a different way. And one day I remember going to my dorm room and I was just so confused. I was like, I don't like how I have to vacillate between multiple different places in order to be accepted. But I learned that because it was a way of surviving in the world, right? A way of surviving in the institution I was in, because if I really show who I was at one point, they don't know if they'll receive me if I'm talking slang all the time. And so, growing up, I really realized, okay, I have to be able to be a chameleon. When I'm here, I gotta do this. And as a radio personality, I'm talking a different kind of a language than when I'm going into the different organizations that I was working for a college and being an adjunct professor. It's a different way I'm showing up. And I'll never forget just stopping one day and realizing that I left one place dressed in sweats and Nikes and a hoodie, and I had to run home to throw on a blazer and a t-shirt and some shoes so I could go to a meeting. And I didn't like it. And in that moment, that's when I realized, why is it so difficult to show up fully as you? And the things that I was taught, like I said, just to go back to Leadership Buffalo, being there at the time we were going and doing our different workshops and our different sessions, Hearing people who weren't from the city of Buffalo and didn't live in the city of Buffalo being so shocked of the lifestyle and how things were made me look at like, man, maybe the things I encountered was trauma. Maybe the things I encountered was damaging and stuff that people aren't really supposed to see.
So for me, it's a little different. So as African American male, it's definitely a trying time, you know, for us. One with a family, one with, you know, businesses that are happening throughout the community, and just being a black male, just period. It's definitely, you know, I think there's like a meme that's going out that kind of like, you know, the appreciation of making it back home is huge. You know, the fear of, you know, getting pulled over is huge because you don't know where that may lead to. The neighborhood that you may live in, you know, I live in a predominantly white neighborhood. So how are they viewing me, or what are they expecting of me during these times? You know, because it's different because I grew up in a setting where it was suburban and it was city. So growing up in a suburban setting, I was able to relate to white people a lot because I grew up, I knew, you know, that they called dinner supper. You know that, you know, and the suppers are like 4 or 5 o'clock, and, you know, I knew that they like, you know, mac and cheese out of the box, and that was like a thing, you know. So, but I knew the summer vacation, I knew how to go on camp, I knew how to shoot, I knew to golf, I knew to play hockey because I was around them, and then I was also around city folk. But then now you're on Facebook, and the same people that, you know, may have been in your house, you may have been at their house, you may have, you know, been at the graduation parties, birthday parties, grandmother's houses, are saying completely different things. So it's kind of like, oh man, did they always feel like that? And I was just a token? You know, so that's me.
I grew up about 2 hours southeast of here, and a small rural place. I would say predominantly white, for sure, a couple thousand people in town. But interestingly, because of that, I also knew everyone, or many people, right? And so that really created this, in a way, I didn't realize it at the time until later, this awesome sense of community. I knew everyone. It was a K through 12 school, so I knew the kindergartners up through 12th grade. You know, it was just the nature of the space. And when I came to Buffalo in 2000, I was ready to get out of the small town. You know, by 10th grade, I was ready to get out. I knew that for a fact. But when I came here in 2000, Buffalo was this like wide open, diverse, for me, city, right? And I was here for 4 years, and then after undergrad, debated this idea: do I stay or do I go? And I think even by that time, I realized that I recreated that hometown community, even if it was really just connected to college. It was at that moment where I was starting to branch out into the city, even in modest ways. It was super modest at the time, much more different than it is now. And that, I think, reignited for me my connection to place, or Buffalo more specifically, because I was able to recreate that small town feeling. And when you talk about like coming for supper, for me, supper or dinner, I don't remember which one was called out, it was always with a cowbell, which sounds crazy, but literally that was the cowbell. So you hear the cowbell at 5 and you come running from wherever you were in the town. So
my mother is white and my father is black, and I grew up in Lackawanna. And in Lackawanna, even in the 80s, it was 25% black, 25% Puerto Rican, 25% white, and 25% a huge Yemen population. So my kindergarten pictures are very diverse, and I didn't know that everybody else wasn't growing up diverse like me. But even though I was in a diverse place in the 80s and 90s, I struggled because I was never white enough for white kids and I was never black enough for the black kids. So it wasn't until I was in high school.
And you were called out for that?
Yeah, like it was always an issue. Like it was always something. Like, you know, black girls were like, oh, you a white girl, you're a white girl. White girls were like, we don't know. Like, you know what I mean? So it was like, and one day, I don't know what it was just like one day I was like, you know what? I don't need to fit in with anybody. Like, I don't have to. Like, for what? I'm going to make you want to be my friend. Mm-hmm. And that's what I did. Like, I don't know how I did it. There isn't, like, a recipe for it. But I just was like, okay, well, why am I constantly trying to fit in with everybody else for what? And I just made it that way. And then as, like you said, as things are happening now in the world, here I was, I had a huge diverse group of friends. And I never thought for a minute that I was a token black friend to anybody. But when things are going on and you see people you're friends with or people that own other businesses or people you grew up with or just establish a rapport with, and when these topics are coming up and their opinions on them, you're like, whoa, like that's crazy. Like I've deleted and battled with people on Facebook and social media and in person to the point where I just don't even really do it anymore. It's hard for me not to though, because it's really hard for me not to. But I did because I'm like, wow, I didn't know that. Like, especially when you know certain things about people. So you're like, so what was this, pretend?
Yeah.
Like, is this pretend? Did you do this because?
Or ignorance.
Well, that's the other part. But I've given people the benefit of the doubt, the ignorant side of it, where it's just like, you just don't know any better. But at this point, these things are a choice. If you didn't know better, because it's true. When I teach a fashion class to kids in high school, if your parents leave the house in their pajamas, you don't know better. You don't know any better either. So it's like if your parents are teaching you something, you don't know any better. But then there's a point where you start to learn on your own that this probably isn't right.
Sure.
And as you get older and older, you have to make that choice to change your mind.
So I grew up in the village of Williamsville and went to a predominantly white high school and then went to Buffalo State. And really for me, going to Buffalo State, that was just like so eye-opening. Buffalo State, it's very diverse. It opened my eyes up to so many different cultures. I then moved to New York and had a fashion career in New York and was exposed to, again, so much diversity. Came back to Buffalo, opened a store right down the street on Elmer, Sweet and Dirty. And had that for a few years, and it was just really interesting to see all the different people that were coming in. And then I became an educator at Buffalo State, and I have been teaching there for 13 years. So my opinion, because Buffalo State is just such an incredible, uplifting, diverse community, it's, for me, that's what I've been around. And then to see the stark contrast of what the rest, of what Buffalo really is. I work, with students every single day and uplift them. And so it's been very eye-opening on Facebook to see people's opinions. But for me, I'm trying not to shame people. I'm trying to bring people in. I think it's really important for us to bring them into the conversation and have an understanding. And really, we need to learn and grow together. That's my platform, right? It's just let's learn, let's grow together and move forward. But I do think that this is the Black Lives Movement has brought about some incredible change, and this is just the beginning.
Well, it's interesting hearing the three stories that preceded mine because not much has changed. And I grew up in Harlem. I was radicalized in Harlem because I grew up in Harlem during the time of Malcolm, during the time of Marcus Garvey Day parades. Brooklyn was still Jewish. Harlem was the place to be. Harlem at that time was, I say, 60% African American, about 35% Puerto Rican and Cuban. Those were the predominant Latino or Latinx cultures that were in New York City at that time. And they were very radicalized. But it's when I came to Buffalo to go to UB, and I made Buffalo my home, that I became racialized. What happened to me, well, growing up in Harlem, I'm growing up in Manhattan, so I was used to diversity. I not only was used to diversity, but really with a sophisticated look of race and class. When I came to Buffalo, it was the first time that I ever was called to my face the N-word. Being in Buffalo was the first time I saw a KKK rally. Being in Buffalo is the first time that I saw poverty that to me reminded me of like Mississippi or the Deep South. We used to call it the Mississippi of the North because poverty in Buffalo really hasn't changed. And so poverty, see, Harlem is an interesting place because there was money in Harlem. So see, I was used to being around money because there was fast money, but there was also intellectuals because right off of Harlem was City College, also was Columbia University. I grew up on the west side of Harlem, so there was money in Harlem. There was regular money and illegal money. So I saw all of that. And what I saw in Buffalo was real segregation because there was no money. Like people who had money did not live on the east side of Buffalo. Apartment over by Buff State, right down the street, Delavan and Richmond. When I got that apartment, the person that rented it to me that owned it was a Jewish man. When I moved in, they were still speaking Italian on Richmond and Delavan. And when I moved in, they threatened to bomb the apartment, the place that I was living in. It was a double. And everybody was so upset because there was this, I was the first one to integrate this neighborhood. And there was this black UB student. First of all, there was a real difference between UB and Buff State. Okay? So UB still is. They might have accepted if I was from Buff State, but I was from UB, and they were like, oh no, what are you doing over here? But things began to change. Well, first of all, when I moved into the neighborhood, they saw that I was a serious student, and they started to love me. I was there for like 15 years. I began to know the people, and what they used to say when anybody came to see me, oh, the black girl lives over there. She not home now, but she usually comes back at around. So they made me part of their community. So it was an enclosed community, but they watched the neighborhood, they watched everything. So they began to take me in. I began to know their names. They began to teach me a little bit of Italian. And they knew I knew some Italian because in Harlem on 116th Street, going over to the east side, was Italian. So I began to shed that New York City persona, and I became more of a Buffalonian. Being at UB, again, at the time that I was at UB, we started the Black Student Union, but also there was a strong feminist movement at UB at the time. So this integration between your racial identity and who you were as a woman was something that was really changing. You were talking about code switching. Mm-hmm. That's what it is. I learned how to code switch very early, which is change the way I was interacting depending on the group that I was in. You explain code switching too, because you can code switch. It's not just black and white. It can be anything. You're the other, so you trying to fit in, so you just go whatever the flow is. After I left the West Side, I own a house on the East Side, and I live on the East Side of Buffalo, and I love the East Side of Buffalo, and I was very shocked when I came to Buffalo that there wasn't more connection between the Puerto Rican community and the African American community. And when I first came to Buffalo, there weren't many Caribbean people here. It was really very black, white, this, that. You were pigeonholed into a category. I've seen that dissolve to some degree. but not enough to make me happy. And so I have spent my life really trying to break down barriers, using the arts. I found people here that I really began to love. That's the best way I could say it. And I found community here, and I started to respect Buffalo and shed that New York City, we know it all. You just little hicks from, we don't know what you're doing, but you know.
It was to celebrate Buffalo's diversity, but have it be inclusion and build those bridges. For one day, everybody can, forget their religion, forget their creed, and kind of come together and celebrate one another. But at the same time, we still have to notice that there's those ceilings in place that's happening here. And even, like, I was talking about kind of like code switching. There's certain things I know I can and cannot say on social media because I know, well, I only get one shot. I don't know who's watching. Huh? There goes that sponsor. First impression, last impression. And I see white males, they can say whatever they want to say. Yeah. Whatever they want to say, however they feel. Business owners of high-end restaurants and real estate firms can say whatever they want. So, with that, as much as we celebrate diversity, we try to include in here, we have to recognize those ceilings. So, like, I'm pretty sure you've seen it at, Buff. We've seen it at Buff State. We've seen it at UB. Just briefly touch on some of your experiences from that. Just kind of seeing like that. Damn, it's here. Like, it's here. It's like, why can't we have, like, for instance, when I started Beau Fleuve, I made it a point to not me be the front of it, because I knew that if I was like, this black male is putting on this diverse event, is going to get labeled black here. But when I step outside of it, very broad, if I do any events in other cities, it's very inclusive right away out the jump. Everybody's ready to jump on top of it. But Buffalo's one of those cities that's like, I don't know. I see Erin's face.
People that have the power to do things will never admit that and own that. Like when you want to go to a certain venue and use it to start your music festival, and it could have started smaller, the guy that owns the venue will never say why. He'll just tell you no, without explanation, without an explanation. And a bunch of other people will still support that guy that lets him thrive, and he's able to do that. And that's the problem that I have personally here, because I think that doesn't make any sense. When I find out through the grapevine or like through social media that this person can say that and this person can do this, or these people are specifically a certain way, I'm not giving you my money anymore. I'm not bringing my money to your restaurant. I don't need a drink at your bar. I don't need to use your venue if it's the best venue on the planet. And I think that even for me, I feel like I can do whatever I want, and I don't think that's fair sometimes for anybody. But I still
Buffalo is this. We've talked about it's transitioning, arising out of something, but over many decades, and it's still a mid-tier city, right? And I guess I have, the way I've approached creativity is I'm an architect, so inherently that's creative. But I never had architecture drafting in high school. It was all art. It was all painting and sculpture and all of that. So that was in my heart, really. But here, architecture is the prime focus, but nice. But what I found, and it's the same for my wife. She loves writing, and I love working with the community and doing art-related events. But architecture allows me to do those things. So it's definitely a privileged place. But it allows me to be that initiator to test the waters in certain places. And we were just talking about the Allentown A thing that popped up recently, but it was a 4-year process of trying to write a grant to get the money and work with an artist, get it curated, get it fabricated, and finally now that sculpture is out, and it took time. But I think it's always about you kind of what you were mentioning is do you initiate or do you not initiate?
I know, I'm
Where do you initiate?
Yeah.
And for me, I don't know, in some cases just asking what others need and trying to facilitate or working as much as possible to make that happen. And one of the fun things for me that has happened is recently, I bought a vacant lot in East Buffalo, right, only 2 blocks off Main Street, but still there. And I bought it because it was close to public transportation, and I could Northland and Waverly.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, right south of Canisius College. Yeah. It's vibrant in its own sense, and I bought it initially because I wanted to create a building that I designed, I could own, yada yada. But that's hard. and that's even as an architect, finding the money for that, it's hard and it's expensive, right? And there's always a component of public art in the building. Like at the front of it, there's removable panels so that every couple of years, every year, or whatever, art could change. But the building couldn't happen. The pandemic happened, it stalled even further.
The pandemic killed a lot.
Yeah, but what I was like, I have to do something. And I like flowers and gardening, so I designed this wildflower art pattern that is going to be roughly the size of the building if it ever should happen. And so they're just colored flower stripes. And, I had to ask for help, get water from the neighbor, because I don't know the community super well. That's not where I live. But because I had to be there every day to take care of these flowers, make sure they grew, the neighborhood kids come by, say, what are you doing? Mom and Dad stop by. I was like, are my kids still up there? and I was like, oh yeah, sure, come help me. Plant the flowers, water with me, weed, whatever. But it wasn't until, I don't know, maybe a month ago, it snapped where the kids ran up to the car and they go, Mr. Seth, Mr. Seth, Mr. Seth. And they're like, when's the next lesson? I'm like, whoa, I wasn't really thinking about this as a teaching moment, but that to me was the first kind of moment of realizing that that was the bridge in my personal mind. For them, it might have been happening all the time. For me, it was that moment of really saying,
Done some type of event or been involved. And one of the things is, I've been doing things for 15 years. And a lot of times just open the door, here you go, right? Use the space. But as I got, older and so forth like that, it's become more of me. It's like, do they want me here? And is it like a energy between both of us for me to have this event here? And if I don't feel it, then I don't want to do it. Because I don't want you to say, here's the space, this is what you can do, this is what you can't do. You don't give me and that was one of the things when we took the event to Silo City, they contacted me 2 weeks after the first one. Was like, hey, why don't you come out and check? We heard some good things about it. And it was the first day I went there, it was Swanee Gym. It was Swanee. And it was an instant, okay, this is about to be it. And it's whatever you want to do. And when you hear that, it's okay, Todd, tell you if I want to have somebody fly at the top of this building, would tell me no. But it really became that relationship Lindsey, if you really want to have this happen, we're going to work with you to make it happen. And it's just them genuine relationships that you really want to have. It's I want to know that I can work with you and it's genuine and it's not one-sided or it's not anything else like that. So, see what's been happening here in the city, across the landscape, in the spring and the summer with racial issues, outside of just us dealing with our own health pandemic. But we have had some real societal things that are happening, that are shifting, a lot of things that are happening. And we've seen our own protests. We have seen our own demonstrations. We've seen our own rallies. Whether everybody agrees with them, they don't agree with them. Whether we all we sat down with elected officials and said, hey, what's happening? So what's your take on it? Because for me, you have endless conversation. I think it was the first week all the protests and stuff started happening. I think my phone was on ring from 8 o'clock in the morning to 3 o'clock in the morning whether it be Adri calling me or one of our other friends calling or somebody's calling like, what the hell do we got to do?
Right.
What do we got to do? From an arts perspective, from a business perspective, from a community standpoint, what do we got to do? Because, we don't want to get caught in that spin cycle. You sit down with the elected officials and they spin you around and you're going to do this, and a third. Because even from my own experience, like when I came down and I actually visited a lot of them. I visited a lot of the protests, kind of just see. I didn't want to march it, but just see what's going on, see what the message was. If it was really for the purpose or really for somebody to stand up and carnival bark in front of a mic, and you see this like, okay, we're talking about black issues, but we don't have a lot of black people down here really down here marching. And then I go out to where I live at and literally have to see a guy on live pissed off and they're boarding up windows in the neighborhood. We're like, why are you boarding up windows? Well, somebody said that they was coming out this way. I didn't hear nobody say they was coming out this way. Ain't nobody coming out this way because you got to drive half the time. Half of us can't drive to get out this way. And then I see, across the street, guys gathering. I'm like, what's about to go on? Adri calling me the one night. I'm like, man, I can't leave the house.
The man said I'm on guard. I said,
I'm on guard.
And sends me a picture of Malcolm X. Much respect.
But I'm on guard. And as we begin to walk throughout the community, it's almost like a nervousness to some people to see black people like, I don't know if I should say hi. Should I not say hi? Should I not say hi?
I know, it was
And I avidly ride my bike, so I'm riding through all type of neighborhoods. I'll ride in Chittiwaga, I'll ride in Amherst, I'll ride in North Buffalo, I'll ride on the west side. And as you get in the right direction, just like if you're a jogger, you get to know the nuances. So like you might ride past somebody, give them a head nod or something like that. And you feel it in certain neighborhoods. The head nod ain't as quick. The bike can go past and it's not as quick. And some people just don't know what to do. Is he gonna smile? And when they smile, they're like, oh, I ain't doing it. I'm not angry, but we try to find a message. So how have y'all reacted to that in your own particular field? Like you're in the city, and I wouldn't even want to ask you this, like as a white male, how have you dealt with this? Coming from, because I'm pretty sure most of your family is still down in the South Towns.
Yeah, parents are moved here, but yeah, my family lives all over the United States, and I think, my wife's from Italy, immigrated here 2003. So we're talking about, was it co-language? Code switching. No, I don't speak Italian well, but I notice I do that there. I'll add some weird American twang to it to try to fit in my broken Italian. But yeah, I don't know. Going back to the project over on Northland, and I say project, but it's those things for me at least. It's just asking what I can do for you, and that head nod, the observation of head nod, that happens every day over there. Because I don't know everyone, but I know a lot more now, and they know like how are the pinks doing, how are the pink flowers doing. I like those look pretty good. Maybe tomatoes next year. I'm like, sure. Maybe we'll do tomatoes next year. Why not? Field of tomatoes. Let's switch it up. But and I don't know, over there it's either African immigrants or African American for sure. It's still very divided. You know better than I.
City in Brooklyn came back up just recently, and she said, Auntie Gail, she said, for the first time, I felt uncomfortable. She's married to a French man. They have 3 children. And she said, I never saw so many MAGA hats and Trump signs as we were driving from New York, coming through Pennsylvania. Because you can go to the expressway, but you can go to Pennsylvania. And that was my experience when I came to Buffalo. Reaction to the fact that black people were asking for the right to vote. And white women said, how can you give the right to vote before you give us the right to vote? So it's really in that history, that pull and tug between power. And see, we don't like to talk about power, In fact, we don't like to talk about race, we don't like to talk about class, we don't like to talk about anything. We have this myth that we've created that we're all one. And so they talk about the United States of America.
And that's
But
the
when-
thing, we have to talk.
Yeah.
We don't talk.
We don't.
We have to talk.
Well, the reason we
The
don't,
conversations.
the reason we don't talk is because I find that people do not want to hear the truth. That when black people speak their truth, it comes
There's
with conditions. The conditions are, number one, we don't believe you, it's not that bad. What are you complaining about? Number two, why are you so angry? Number three, you're fine now. Slavery's over, you got the right to vote. What are you complaining about? So again, talking is not enough.
Yeah, well, it's doing the work.
It is.
Like, I know that I have
It
to
is-
do the work.
It is trusting.
Yeah.
It is trusting. And right now, there is no trust. And when you see a flag, a U.S. flag, flying with a Confederate flag, and you have to explain to people that the Confederate flag represents individuals who fought against the United States of America, and that there is incongruence between flying a flag for the country when the people that you are honoring, or the history that you're honoring, fought not only against the United States, but assassinated a president in the process. And they don't even get that. They feel like both of them are the same, which means to me that they are saying that racism is an inherent part of American culture, and that the representation of that flag is so ingrained, and when I'm talking about the Confederate flag, that we can fly both of them at the same time and not even think about it and wonder why people are upset.
Like, I know, like, just things that I've, like, you know, from pandemic and the Black Lives Movement, you know, like awareness, like I need to really, you know, kind of, where am I coming from? What's my perspective?
That's the foundation.
You know? I think that's the foundational knowledge of, like, we all have to kind of, okay, what's my makeup? Who am I? You know? And then only when you know, like, who you are, and then you can learn. You have to have awareness of cultures.
Or what I think
And then
what you're
bridge
talking
that
about,
gap.
Gail, is like what are the truths of our history, and what are the ones that I wasn't brought up with. You know, I hate to say this, but my family was friends with a family from Alabama in my southern tier, pretty white town. They were good people. I believe they were good people, I think. But there was a Confederacy party that they held with the flag, and I'm thinking about this now, you know, because I was probably 5 at the time, but that is remarkable to even imagine that was the theme, right? That was the theme. But I think it's the foundational knowledge, and you know, as this kind of reckoning has happened as a white person in the position naturally of power, right, that you're talking about.
I think
I felt obliged to read it. You're talking about the books, and you know, for me, that's the individual way that I can address it, to just be more aware of the truths that were happening, and then hopefully I can get to the point of recognizing them, so that you know, you can be even more inclusive than what I believe I am, but even more so, because inherently it's hard.
I would say my word is frustrated. Frustrated. And the reason I would say it's frustrated, I love it, and I truly, truly do love it, everything that's done. But it's frustrating to the point because we have these conversations all the time. It's like, why the hell is it this ceiling? And me, you kind of like, and Erin has reached out to me, and every night we can't really say, you gotta hold your hands tightly like, oh my God, I'm frustrated. Why do I have to beg people to get behind something? Why do we have to do all this type of stuff? And Erin was like, if you need help, let me know. You know, but it's that frustration. It's like, you know this, we can keep it. You can know this shit is dope. You know it's lit. You know it's a great time. You know the community gets behind it. What's the issue? You know, and you see so many times you see other things that are not as of value of quality to the real community get the just due. But the ones who are really doing things, what you were doing with Massive Hill. I remember when I was in college when I was happening. And how like that was a huge event. We couldn't get a goddamn ticket to go to Massive Hill. but that's the thing. Like that should still that should still be. There shouldn't be a reason why that's not still going on. You know, there should be a reason why we aren't huge with the radio. You know, it shouldn't be those reasons. We shouldn't have to beg say, who do we have to find? Who we have to search? It shouldn't have to just be token situations. You know, so I think that's my reason. Frustrated.
Interesting you say that. I was, probably a couple years ago I would have said like excited or, enthused, but I think maybe similar to yours is this sense of angst. That I think angst can be good and bad, and I feel it in different ways on different days, I think. But I think this era for me now is a sense of angst or anxiety in some cases. But it comes and goes. I think it's in waves. As it should be, and hopefully, as it should be.
Hopefully it turns back to the excitement.
Sorry?
Hopefully it turns back to the excitement.
Yeah, I generally have a pretty positive outlook in the long run, and I think it's because there's a diverse community around, and that that shouldn't be a painful process to reach out and just talk, work, play with whomever else wants to talk, work, and play as well. It doesn't have to be complicated.
I love Buffalo and I've lived here all my life, so I don't want to be too negative, but I'm going to use the word stagnant. So even though I do see growth in certain areas of Buffalo, I realize that the growth is majority of the people that I already know because we're all in these same fields. So I see the growth in the things that people are doing, but it's because I know everybody. I don't see everybody else doing and growing with us. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like that small population, even though we're like still like, oh yeah, we're doing this, we're doing that. It's like, yeah, it's the same people that have been doing it for years, forever. Where are the new faces? Who else? Why isn't things like these making other people come out of the woodwork and build with everybody or be a part of it? You know what I mean? Like, why aren't people from Amherst or somebody? I know that there's artsy people out there. I know that there's other people interested in fighting different injustices.
Okay, my word. I'm gonna be positive because I'm a very positive person.
I'm very positive too.
Anybody knows me. No, I'm gonna say like uplift. Like, I that's my relationship with Buffalo right now is that I have a platform with Buffalo Spree magazine, being the style editor, and even at Buffalo State with the work that I do there, and I want to uplift my community and use my platform to really showcase our BIPOC community, and so I'm uplifting.
I love it.
And now my word is ownership. I'm now all about owning Buffalo, owning the story, and really now tapping into my community. Because before I live in the hood, and I would come to the hood, be out, and try to get and do what I needed to do and not pay attention. So now I'm walking around seeing like, yo, this messed up around here. So I need to really invest in it. So my biggest thing is ownership and making sure that I buy into my city, do what I can for my city, and still put on for myself.
So as I'm sitting here and I'm listening and I'm considering where Buffalo has come from when I came in 1967 and where it is now, it's definitely in a different place. But I'm a disruptor. Mm-hmm. And what that means is I am the type of person that is always looking to change things for the better, to bring my experience into Buffalo. And so that's why we started the Center for Positive Thought, the Black Dance Workshop, Watu-Sakoni, the People's Market, Juneteenth, Kwanzaa. All of those things were things that were coming from other places that we bought and made it Buffalo's own. So that's what I do.
I really appreciate it. Thank everybody for being here. It was a very enlightening conversation, very enlightening conversation. And I appreciate all of you. I'm really doing all your own facets and plays, and hope we continue to evolve in ownership, because it's needed. It's needed. All of us in some way, somehow, regardless if we move away, stay here, grow here, we're here. It's still in us. They're going to recognize us even when we leave. So thank you guys for being here, and thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.